Call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Community Development Committee for the Metropolitan Council. It's September 2nd, 2025. I'm Councilmember Robert Lilligren, Chair of the committee, joined by a quorum. I will start with the Dakota Land, Water, and People Acknowledgement. The Metropolitan Council acknowledges that the land we currently call Minnesota, and specifically the 7-county region, is the ancestral homeland of the Dakota Oyate, who are present and active contributors to our thriving region. As part of the Metropolitan Council's commitment to address the unresolved legacy of genocide, dispossession, and settler colonialism, and the fact that government institutions, including the Metropolitan Council, benefited economically, politically, and institutionally after the forcible removal of the Dakota Oyate, the Metropolitan Council is dedicated to instilling land, water, and people commitments in regional policy. These commitments support the Dakota Oyate, the 11 federally recognized tribes in Minnesota, Ho-Chunk Nation, and the American Indian communities representing over 150 diverse tribal nations that call the 7-county metro region home. Committee members, we have an agenda in front of us. If no one has any suggestions, additions, amendments, we'll consider that approved. Great, we have an agenda. Next on the agenda is approval of the August 18th, 2025 Community Development Committee minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move that.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Carter. Thank you, Councilmember Chambliss. Any discussion, additions, corrections? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you. We'll move on to our consent agenda. 2 items, school comprehensive plan amendment and regional parks grant programs. Signature authorization. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Councilmember Chambliss. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Carter. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Next, we have our one non-consent business item. It's item 2025-223. It's funding recommendations for the 2025 Livable Communities Act Pre-Development and Policy Program grant. And we have Marcus Martin, Mr. Martin, and Olivia Bolshinger here to present. Oh, and I should know, we have Terry Smith here sitting in for Director Baraja, so thank you. And Terry and I were just chatting before the meeting started, and it's always a nice day when you're giving money away. This makes it a little nicer, so we appreciate your work on this and your presentation.
Yes. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and Council members. My name is Olivia Bershinger, and myself and Marcus will be presenting recommendations this evening. So we've got both our pre-development and our policy and program grants for you all.
Great.
So I will start with some brief background about the Livable Communities Act. Many of you are familiar with. All of the LCA grant programs share some goals, including creating more housing choices throughout the region, supporting the growth of living wage jobs, improving connections between where people live or work, and regional amenities like parks and other amenities, and support for more equitable development outcomes. Starting with the policy and program development grants, the Policy Development Grant Program supports locally adopted policies that have an impact on the physical development of a city. So this is part of our effort to help cities create the conditions needed to make progress towards their regional goals. If we recall back to June, this second round of our policy development grants offered an expanded policy and program development with the use of our HUD Pro funds that were received. So it included both additional funds and allowed for additional uses to go beyond just the traditional policy into programs and partnerships as well.
So as Olivia mentioned, we are also offering the pre-development grants, and the LCA pre-development grants are for applicants who are in the early stages of physical development or redevelopment projects that have the potential to advance LCA and regional development goals. Pre-development grants are intended for projects that need to complete additional work to fully shape and add detail to the final development plans. These grants typically cover a range of activities which include but are not limited to financial feasibility analysis, various building construction or site design studies, infrastructure engineering, concept planning, and community engagement. So not construction, but most things outside of that. We are recommending funding from 3 pools of funding. Funding for the policy and pre-development programs were approved by the fund distribution plan adopted back by the council, adopted in February. And half of the funding for the pre-development was awarded already this spring. We did not receive any applications for the policy program at that time, so we reserved that amount. The full amount is available for the second round today. And as Olivia already mentioned, we did have additional funding for the policy program from the HUD Pathways to Removing Obstacles to Housing grant, also known as HUD Pro, that the council received from HUD in June last year. We'll look at here a bit at the schedule. After significant outreach and technical assistance on July 21, 5 pre-development applications and 8 policy applications were received for the round 2 funding opportunities. Eligible applications were reviewed by an interdisciplinary team of council staff. And today the recommendation is being presented to CDC, and that, as shown in that shaded part of the diagram. And the committee recommendations are scheduled for final approval by the full council on September 10.
All right, so we will first take a look at the evaluation criteria and recommendations for the policy and programs grant. Applications were scored on 3 evaluation criteria. I like to kind of break it out into the what, the how, and finally the who. So the what or the outcomes is how well the policy or program outcomes align with council goals, so both incorporating LCA and Thrive, and then soon to be Imagine goals. The how is the process, so this is where the analysis of the impact of the policy or program, what it will have on the community and who it will reach. And then finally, the who is the team. So this is either the scope of work that the city or community will work with a consultant to complete, or the criteria that the city will use to select a consultant in any case. Applicants do need to earn at least 25 of the available 60 points to be eligible for funding. We did have 7 eligible applications, all of them meeting minimum scores for funding. As Marcus had mentioned, cities can receive up to $50,000 in policy development funds per round. We did not have any applications in the first round, and so any funds from the first round were rolled over into this. All of the projects are receiving the full funding amount that was requested, which is $311,000, as you can see in the table. 3 of the projects will be funded with the LCA Policy Grant Program funds approved by Council in February, as mentioned, and 4 will be funded with the HUD Pro funds, given their expanded objectives and deliverables. The $50,000 of unawarded LCA policy funds will be awarded to projects applying through the LCDA and TOD application process later this fall, as allowed for in the FDP, which was previously council approved, and then the remaining $439,000 in HUD Pro funds will be used for future HUD Pro activities. So I just want to point out, again, we had the 7 applications, the City of Hopkins, City of Richfield, HRA, City of Blaine, and City of New Brighton, all with proposed projects that went beyond our traditional policy program, so looking at different types of housing assessments, studies, and program creation, with a few even focusing on the utilization of their LAHA funds. And then the City of Eden Prairie, City of Edina, and City of Golden Valley receiving or recommended to receive the funds through the LCA funding for policy updates, many with a focus on like zoning and subdivision or code updates. just to go over a couple, again, highlights like I was just talking about, and I want to note there should be a correction. This says pre-development grants. It should say our policy and program grants, so I apologize. When taking a closer look at these policies and program proposals, again, there's 3 communities that reference or talk about the utilization of their community's recent LAHA funds. So that is the local affordable housing tax that is received from the state. 4 communities are looking to update city ordinances, again, many relating to zoning and subdivision. And with this new expanded opportunity, there's proposals for research and development and creation of 4 or more new locally administered housing programs. Again, some which overlap with the LAHA funds and some will be supported with other city funds there. So that's pretty exciting to see 4 new locally created programs.
So we'll also take a look at the evaluation and the recommendations for the pre-development grants. That's one more of these.
Yes.
All right. Pre-development applications are scored on 2 evaluation categories, project outcomes and how they meet the LCA and Thrive goals, soon to be 2050, and project process, which includes community engagement and representation of the community being served by the project. Applications need to receive 15 out of the 30 available points to be eligible for funding. So we'll look at the applications here now. We received 5 applications requesting a total of 1.3 million. 4 out of the 5 applications met that minimum score for funding. Each city can receive up to $300,000 in pre-development awards each round. So I'll just read through them. Staff is recommending grants to be awarded for 4 projects, starting with the Oyate Ota Center, $297,000. This is for supporting the renovation of a building in a multi-tenant service center for the indigenous community. 5400 block of Brooklyn Boulevard in the amount of $152,500, supporting the development of affordable for-sale townhomes. Lexington Deluxe, $300,000, supporting the development of 31 affordable apartments, and 853rd Avenue Northeast in the amount of $250,500, supporting the development of nearly 250 affordable apartments. We did that one project that did not meet the minimum score. That was the Nature Point townhouses, excuse me. And we do encourage them to reapply with more details about kind of the level of affordability and that kind of community engagement process that they either are in the process of using to kind of demonstrate that community need for the project. If all the projects recommended for funding are completed as planned, the region would add up to 11 for-sale townhomes, including 9 3-bedroom units, nearly 280 affordable apartments with a mix of 1, 2, 3, and 4-bedroom units, and 36,000 square feet of renovated space for the American Indian Family Center, Interfaith Actions Department of Indian Work, and the Montessori American Indian Child Care Center. So the staff recommendation is that the Metropolitan Council award 4 Livable Communities Act pre-development grants totaling $1 million, as shown in Table 1 of the business item. Award 7 Livable Communities Act policy and program grants totaling $311,000, as shown in Table 2 of the business item, and authorize the Executive Director of Community Development to execute the grant agreements on behalf of the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Ms. Michigan, thanks for your work on this and for the report. And it's good to see the interest and increased demand with the policy development program.
Yes.
It was a little disappointing not to receive any the first round. Questions on that report?
No,
Yeah, please, Councilmember Chambliss.
no questions. I'm glad to see that we have the townhouse funding because we do need, more dense housing, as well as the 3-bedroom units. It looks like we got 9 for the pre-development funding, so that's great.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'm just gonna know, even in the presentation and in the report, I don't see the line about authorizing the development director to sign these contracts on our behalf. Am I missing something?
If it is missing.
You reported it verbally.
Yes, if it is missing, that is an omission on our part.
Okay.
We are not authorized to sign, so we would.
Sure,
love to add that.
yeah.
Sorry, hi, I'm Emily Seddon, and the LCA manager.
Thanks, Emily.
All of these grants are under $500,000, and the executive director has signing authority up
Has
to
authority.
$500,000.
Thank you for
So
that
that piece
clarification.
is not required in this.
Great, thank you,
Yep.
thank you. Further discussion on this report? Yeah, Councilmember Lindstrom.
Thanks. I'm just curious if, on the pre-development grants, if any of these projects are going to more emerging developers. I seem to recall, maybe it was one of our past community development meetings, that developers wanted more money in the actual construction. But one reason for these pre-development grants is that there was oftentimes, where it wasn't unusual, that more younger or emerging developers access these pre-development grants. I may have just made that up, but I have that memory.
Yes.
And so I'm just curious about these particular projects.
Mr. Martin.
Chair, members of the council or committee, yes, I think the Lexington Deluxe is a good example of that. ABBA is what you consider emerging developer. She participated in the Emerging and Diverse Developers educational program at the county. So with that kind of training in hand, she was able to pull this together here among her other efforts to make the project work. It is done, of course, as a team, but that's a good example of the support.
Thank you.
Sure sounds like one, thanks.
Further discussion, Councilmember Chambliss, then Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, that was a good example. I know that emerging developers have used our pre-development funds as well as our regular community development funds. And as part of Imagine 2050, we're looking at how some of our new goals and initiatives can benefit those emerging developers. And I think we'll probably see that reflected in maybe some of the scoring or some of the analysis for what their needs are for capacity, for readiness, and things like that.
Cool, thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. With redistricting, North St. Paul is one of the communities now under my, in my communities list, and I just kind of feel bad that they scored so low, and I hope if they ask for feedback, if we can be honest with them and let them know how they can improve their applications in future rounds.
Yeah, Mr. Martin.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I was able to talk with the community development director today. We did kind of explain some of our thought process behind the recommendation, and we are hopeful that we can find another suitable grant for them to proceed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? If not, staff proposes 2 actions to award $1 million in the Livable Community Act pre-development grants and $311,000 in the Livable Communities Act Policy and Affordable Housing Program grants. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Carter. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Discussion on that motion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thanks for your work on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Council members will now move into the first of our 2 information items for this evening. It's the 2024 Plat Monitoring Report and Program Update. And Mackenzie Young Walters is here to report. Welcome.
Greeting Chair, council members. Sorry we're a little late this year. I was away for a few months on paternity leave, but we're finally getting to this.
Congratulations.
Thank you. There we go. So a little bit of background before we jump in. Throughout this presentation, I will be referring to the Thrive 2040 community designations and policies. That's because in 2024, when this data is from, Thrive was still the plan in force at the time. Next time we do this, we will be using Imagine 2050 policies and baselines. And I did have a little bit on the cover sheet about how we're going to be updating the program. That's not the subject of today's discussion, but I'm happy to field at the end general questions on that if you'd like. Just be prepared for me not to be able to go too deeply into the numbers. With that being said, jumping into our 2024 report. So the plat monitoring program originates back in 2001. We created this working with a bunch of cities, as well as metro cities and Housing First Minnesota. The initial group was 12 pilot cities, and they reported their plat monitoring data from the year 2000 to us. Right now, it's up to 45 communities, and all of these communities annually give us the information of Seward residential plats. And we use that for a couple reasons. We use it to measure the success of local communities in implementing council policies, just to track a bunch of interesting information that we'll go into later about Seward residential developments, and also to gather information on the land supply we have within the MUSA, the Municipal Urban Services Area, and also to monitor the trends for the overall net density of developments. So I mentioned that we started out with 12 communities. Those are shown in hash marks on the map you're looking at. Subsequently, we brought it up to 45 communities. Those are the ones in light blue. A lot of the communities were added as a condition of comprehensive plan amendments. So maybe they wanted to bring in an area of the community at a little lower density. And we said, well, if you can show us that you've been consistently platting at or above policy, we'll authorize that amendment, but you need to join the program. So a lot of these communities ended up joining around the comprehensive plan updates. The areas in white are the areas that are not in the program. Most of our communities are in the suburban edge categories. We have others that are rural center. Some of the municipalities, and some of these do have multiple community designations, so you will have some, especially in the emerging suburban edge, that might have a portion that's designated, say, diversified rural. We're not tracking developments in those community designations. We're only tracking developments that are Seward. So within the portion of the community that's designated suburban edge, emerging suburban edge, or rural center. Rural centers are included because even though many of them are not connected to the metropolitan waste system, they are in our long-term service area, and that means, in order to ensure our system operates efficiently, we do need them to meet the minimum 3 units per acre policy requirement. So this map shows the overall platting activity throughout the history of the program. As you can see, not surprisingly, a lot of where we're seeing development is at the periphery of cities, at the edge of the MUSA, moving out greenfield development, which is common for cities in these categories. A lot of the development does occur, of course, near transportation corridors or areas with readily accessible greenfield development. You'll notice a couple of the participants are in gray. Gray on this map shows developed communities. That's because when the program was first started in 2000, we were under the 2030 Regional Development Guide, and at that time, those communities were designated as developing. Subsequently, with Thrive 2040, they have been categorized as developed communities, but they're still enrolled in the program. And I believe those are our 4 suburban participants. Oh, and the green areas are located outside of the MUSA, so those are our rural service areas. This graph, which is in your report, shows the housing mix and number of units platted. So just a little bit of information. In 2024, we had 103 plats, a little below our average of 115 plats throughout the course of the program, but better than last year's 93 plats. Of these, about 3,500 were single-family units, and about 3,700 were multifamily. That's about a 49% single family, 51% multifamily. That's a higher percentage of multifamily than the program's historic average. Historically, we're about 55% single family units and 45% multifamily. This trend was present last year as well, and actually accelerated a little bit this year. All told, in 2024, we had 7,260 residential units. That's up from last year's 6,896 units. It is lower than the program high of 11,530 that we had in 2022. As you can see, we had a pretty big spike in 2020 and 2022. One of the vexing things about this data is we don't exactly know why we see what we see. And so it's difficult to know exactly why we saw that spike. If I was making bets, I'd guess record low interest rates probably spurred some construction, but I can't prove it from what I have in front of me. That being said, the average number of units we get in a year has been 6,098, so we are trending above average, with the record low being 286 in 2009. Not surprising at the height of the recession. So one of the things we use this program for is helping us to understand and determine consistency of local plans with council policy. One of the ways we do that is by looking at how many units are compared to the theoretical minimum units that could have been done and the theoretical maximum, and then also evaluating that based on the midpoint. That's what this graph shows here. So if, for example, in 2004, if all 103 plats would have been platted at the maximum density their comprehensive plan allowed. So let's say a land use allowed 3 to 6 units an acre, and every plat came in at 6 units an acre. Just making up the numbers, obviously, we would have gotten 12,658 units. If, on the other hand, every plat would have came in at the very minimum density that their comprehensive plan allowed, we would have had 4,253 units. Since our actual total was 7,260, we know that people are platting above the minimum allowed, but we do know they're not quite hitting the midpoint, which would have been 8,456 units. This is pretty typical. There's a pretty good break if we look at the example. Pre-2009, communities pretty consistently were platting right about the midpoint, pretty close to halfway between the minimum and maximum allowed for their land use designations. Post-2009, pretty consistently, communities were falling below the midpoint. Again, the vexing thing is I don't have any data to explain that, but it is something we've observed, and it has been a pretty consistent break throughout the program years. This one goes through the overall density of the programs. One thing to keep in mind is that for the vast majority of the program participants, 3 units per acre is the policy requirement that they were required to meet under Thrive 2040. There are the 4 suburban communities that would have had to meet 5 units an acre, which is why I didn't put the trend line showing 3, because some communities aren't held to that. But to clarify, by and large, for most of our plat monitoring communities, 3 units per acre is the Metropolitan Council policy goal. As you can see, consistently, our program participants have been platting above that. There was a dip in 2009, again, a rough year, and it was 2.8. Right now, the average program history platted net residential density is 4 units an acre, again, well above the 3. And this year, we were just a teeny bit below last year's high of 5.6 for the annual total. Just for fun, the actual difference is last year was 5.59 units per acre, and we were at 5.55 units per acre this year. So again, just a hair below, but still really strong numbers. I will say this is only one portion of how we determine communities' consistency with their comprehensive plans. We also do consistency and conformance checks when they apply for sewer extension permits and when we review comprehensive plan amendments based on their planned land uses. So this is just one component, but it is a component communities can use to get flexibility in getting comprehensive plan amendments approved. This graph breaks down land utilization. So one of the things we ask communities to do is report their net residential density. That's the amount of land that is actually usable for development once things are like wetlands are taken out, steep slopes that are protected by ordinance, public parks and open space, arterial right-of-ways, and a couple other odd things like transmission line easements, things that communities don't really have any control of that renders portions of a site undevelopable. Typically, we see over the last 10 years, about 46% of land actually ends up being land that the community develops when they do a plat. So that's the net developable acreage in green on that graph. We've been seeing right about 10% or so being wetlands and other water bodies has been pretty typical throughout the last decade. Arterials are very consistent at about 2% of total area. Parks and open spaces are typically around 5%. This year was a little odd. For some reason, parks and open space dropped to 1%. Hard to know exactly why, but just something we observed in the data. Most of the variation we see from year to year tends to be between that other category and the net residential category. The other category is, vast majority is outlots that are reserved for future development. A lot of time the developer will get, say a 100-acre parcel, they'll develop 30 acres, reserve 70 acres for future phases, and then work through it in chunks. So in order to keep those future phases from artificially depressing the net density, we let them remove that and we put that in the other category, and then we track that as programs go through. So hopefully that explanation makes sense, but consider it land banked for future development. And that tends to be where a lot of our year-to-year fluctuation is. Again, we see a pretty big shift in that if we look at the graph where we used to see a lot more land in the net residential pre-2009, and then post-2009, we began seeing quite a bit more land on average reserved for future developments. So again, just something to notice in the data. The other thing we track with the plat monitoring program is lot absorption. Lot absorption is the amount of time it takes from when the plat is recorded, so when the lots are created, to when a building permit is pulled. The 0 represents if the building permit is pulled in the same year the plat is reported. Unfortunately, our data set on this is a little mismatched with our plat monitoring data set because we didn't start getting the geolocated permit data until 2009. So that's as far back as our building permit records can be linked up to plats. That being said, due to legacy plats, we do have a range of 0 to 22 years right now for how long it takes for a permit to be pulled. As you can see, vast majority get done within 2 years. I believe about 70%, I don't know why I said it's 70%, get pulled within 2 years of being platted. Goes up to 80% if we go to within 3 years. Generally speaking, the faster the rate of lot absorption is an indicator of really strong market demand, very fast and efficient processing. Slower speeds can be linked to lower market demand, although when we get to individual lots, it's really hard to know why a given lot develops very quickly or very slowly. In every subdivision, you have some lots that are simply a little less desirable than others and might hang out for a few years before someone picks them up. Next slide on lot absorption is we've broken the data out. In addition to just globalized, we've broken it down by community designation and then as well as by housing type. Suburban communities have the fastest lot absorption rate. Rural centers have the slowest lot absorption rate. But those two categories are only about 8% of our permit volume within the program. The vast majority of permits, 92%, come from our suburban edge and emerging suburban edge communities, both of which, apologies, I should have written that down and my eyes are not good enough to read the number. Are, I believe, in the mid-2s. They're pretty comparable. So again, we do see, as the graph before showed, a lot of our stuff is developed within 2 to 3 years of when the lot is created. We have a pretty similar situation going on when we look at it by housing types. Twin, quadplexes, triplexes are the fastest at 2.14. Slightly later at 2.19 is multifamily. And then single-family housing, which is the vast majority of our permits, about 81%, is that a 2.31?
5-1.
5-1, thank you very much. I'll make them bigger next year, I promise. And then townhomes are the slowest at 2.7. And I did include ADUs again. In all fairness, I don't know that I should have this as a data point because we currently only have 7 that have happened within the plat monitoring program. But we do track it, so I thought it would be interesting to report it. But I do want to disclose that again, in terms of share of permitting volume, this is not a significant amount of activity that we're seeing. Which isn't that surprising, being as a lot of our plats are still fairly newer, and ADUs tend to be something you'd build, you know, maybe decades after the original home, not when you're pulling your initial building permit. But that concludes my prepared remarks. I'm very happy to answer any questions you would like.
Thank you, Mr. Young-Walters. Questions on that report? Any discussion? Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad to see a balanced lot absorption on the different types of housing. That indicates that our plats are balanced at what the market wants. I remember when I was on the Lakeville City Council before I came here, we knew something was going wrong in the development world when the townhouse plats started having the 12 or 15 or, you know, huge number of years supply. That's when we knew things were getting a little weird in the housing market before the crash. I have heard from the city administrator of Lakeville, I was talking to him last week, that the last 3 apartment buildings that have come through and been approved then decided just not to build. What happens to those when you do the?
Yep. So right now they'll be in our system as approved unless the city reaches out and tells me that, you know, this plat didn't go forward, which some cities do. Some cities will tell me, hey, we had a development last year, it didn't go forward, please remove it from our numbers. As it is, it's in the spreadsheet. However, what will typically happen is at some point, that site will either be picked up by a new developer, it'll be reapproved with different numbers. At that point, it's correcting. They would report it. They would have a note saying, this was the former site of X. I would then go in and remove that data entry and our records would get cleaned up. Even if they don't note to me that it's a replacement, because I have to go in and hand draw all the little polygons, I will notice that there's already a development there, and then I would reach out to the city and say, hey, I'm seeing an apartment in this year, can you let me know what's going on? And we'd clean it up that way. So that's how we keep it clean.
Thank you.
All right, good question. Further discussion, Councilmember Lindstrom.
Can you give us a sneak peek on how things may be changing with the plat monitoring program?
Yep.
With 2050?
Yep, Chair, Councilmember Lindstrom. Yeah, so what we're looking to do is, let me back up. So imagine 2050, the direction we got from the council was to look at the plat monitoring program and explore the impact of a shorter look back scenario. One of the things that we've realized is with 20-some years of data, there's a lot of old plats, for lack of a better word, that were done under the even 2030 regional development guideline or early parts of 2040, where communities may have been platting at much lower densities than they're platting now. That means that very few communities are able to take advantage of the plat monitoring program's flexibility requirements, because under Thrive 2040, they're guiding theoretical land use at higher densities than their program records will ever show. There's just too much data for them to move it up with high density developments now. So what staff did was we explored initially 4 scenarios that then got expanded to 5. We looked at what impact we'd have on the numbers if we ran everything from 2010 on, from 2014 on, from 2019 on, as well as a scenario where we just looked at the most recent 10 plats. Communities then also, when we presented the rough of these scenarios to them, asked us to explore a 20-year scenario, largely because our rural centers and some of our slower growing emerging suburban edge communities just don't have that much platting activity. And if we did, the 2014, 2019 scenario, they were looking at having 4 plats we'd be looking at. which obviously creates problems with the data, right? Because one big or small development would just radically shift their trajectory. So I did some fun work in Excel and got a rough feeling for how all of these different scenarios would impact every community's median net density, average net density, the number of communities that would go into or out of compliance with both Thrive 2040 and Imagine 2050 policies based on these changes. And then we identified which ones we feel would be plausible to go forward with. The 2010 scenario, the 20-year scenario, and the and the 10 plat scenario just didn't work very well. The longer scenarios didn't have a significant change on the data set we had because a lot of our communities, almost half, joined after 2007. As you saw from our slides, we had very low platting activity in that 2007 to 2009. So taking those out didn't change anyone's numbers at all. So we really kind of drilled down on the 2014 and 2019 scenarios as possible ones to go forward. And then we're looking at adding or last 10 plats to provide protection for those smaller communities that are going to have a lot of their plats drop off if we constrict the data sets. And so that's what we'll be bringing to LUAC, and I believe later this month, to get some input on. And once we've received that input and fine-tuned those, I'll come back before you and bring lots of numbers on the scenarios that look like they're most likely to accomplish the council's goal of making this program more relevant for communities to use for flexibility, especially since a lot of our suburban edge communities have said, you know, with the change to 3.5, they would really like the flexibility of being able to lean on all of the good work they've done and that we know they've done to get a little flexibility in how they guide their land uses.
Thank you. Further discussion on this report? Questions? Discussion? Yeah, Councilmember Lindstrom.
Just curious, will LUAC be making a single recommendation to community development?
I believe, and Director Torres, please correct me if I'm wrong, that they will just be providing us direction that we will incorporate, but I don't know that we'll be getting like a formal single recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Torres, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Of course. Angela Torres, the Senior Manager of Local Planning Assistance, not Director, I didn't get a promotion by any means. The Land Use Advisory Committee will make a single recommendation. That recommendation will come for this body. Really just trying to focus on the improvements that Mackenzie was mentioning. So we can share those materials that we prepare for LUAC with this committee when we come before you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. I went down the wrong way. Any further discussion on this report? Hearing none, thank you, Mr. Young-Walters, and you're here for the next item as well, which is our final information item. It's the 2024 Agricultural Preserves Program.
Yep, and apologies for this first slide. We decided to make it more context appropriate, but I forgot to delete my initial introduction slide. So pretend you didn't see the skyline of St. Paul. So this is the Metropolitan Agricultural Preserves Program. Every year we do a report of this program, which we report on the number of acres enrolled in the Metropolitan Agricultural Preserves Program. This program was started in 1980, and we've been monitoring it since 1982. The process behind the program is that the reason why we're involved is it has a comprehensive planning component. Communities are required to certify which areas of their community are appropriate for long-term agriculture, and then they are required to adopt zoning and land use controls of a maximum of 1 unit per 40 acres on those areas in order for properties to be eligible to be enrolled in the Metropolitan Agricultural Preserves Program. Generally speaking, in order to be eligible for enrollment, a property needs to be a minimum of 40 acres. There are a few exceptions, like you can be 35 acres if the original quarter section is missing a piece, or if something was dedicated towards road right-of-way. Another is if you're 20 acres, but a portion of it was you're surrounded by two sides prior to 1980, or a portion was previously subdivided out. So you get the idea. They tried to create exemptions for some of the odd stuff that pops up. But generally, it's a 40-acre requirement. The program process works is that a local owner applies through the local authority, which is the entity that has zoning authority. So we are never the local authority. We only track and monitor it. Either the city, township, or county would be the local authority. The local authority then approves the enrollment. The counties handle the taxation benefits. Once you're enrolled in the program, you're guaranteed a minimum $1.50 per acre tax credit. It can be significantly more depending on the difference in the tax rate. The formula is basically they look at either the lowest of the local tax or 105% of the average township tax throughout Minnesota, and then they use that to create the tax differential. So you get the benefit of the difference between that baseline tax and what you would normally be taxed. Again, minimum of $1.50 per acre. We'll go into a little bit of the numbers later on. In terms of how the program can terminate, it's a minimum of an 8-year term. After 8 years, under current rules, the owner can apply for a termination. At that point, it starts an 8-year clock. So 8 years after the owner requests the expiration of the program ends and the property exits. There is now a provision that if the owner and the local authority agree, the owner can request the 8-year extension after the first 8 years, and by a majority vote, the local authority can approve the parcel leaving early. There's also a few exemptions for death of the owner and situations where the governor declares a state of emergency. Typically, I believe that's around highway right-of-way, and a couple other minor exemptions for some park and trail dedications. But generally speaking, once a property's in, it's designed to be pretty protected. This graph shows the program's enrollment trends from the year 2000 to 2024. There's kind of a couple distinct phases that I'd like to walk through. From 1980 to 2000, which is pre this graph, the program started at 0 when it was initiated and went up to about 200,000 acres enrolled. Between 2000 and 2009, about 20,000 acres were removed from the program, bringing us down to 180,000 acres. From 2009 to 2013, with the Great Recession, a lot of interest was taken in putting agricultural property in. So 30,000 acres were added to the program, bringing us up to just under 210,000 acres. From 2014 to 2017, the program was very stable. Between those years, we lost 800 acres. So not too much came out. From 2017 to present, we've seen a pretty slow but pretty steady withdrawal of acreage from the program. About 17,000 acres have been pulled out, bringing us to around 191,000. Between 2023 and 2024, I think about 1,200 acres, 1,300 acres were pulled out, which is a 0.65% drop. All in all, we've lost about 8.8% of the acreage enrolled from the program's 2015 high. When we look at enrollment by county, the majority of the acreage is in Carver County. They're at just under 100,000 acres. So that's nearly half of the total enrollment. Dakota County, with about 70,000 acres, is our next largest participant. Our smallest is Anoka with just over 500 acres enrolled. Generally speaking, from year to year, we've seen a decrease in all counties, although last year Anoka added about 100 acres to the program. They went from 468 acres to 569 acres, so they did actually increase their share. All told, I believe it's about 87% of the acreage in the program is Carver and Dakota County. This map shows our enrolled parcels. As you can see, as I said, very heavily in the agricultural belts in western Carver and southeastern Dakota County. You can see that Hennepin and Washington both have just under 10,000 acres. I'm sorry, oh my goodness. Hennepin and Scott County have just under 10,000 acres, with Washington around 6,000, for our total of 191,033 acres enrolled. I mentioned we could talk a little bit more about the funding. The program is funded by a $5 fee on mortgages and deeds. Of that $5 fee in each county, half goes into the county conservation fund, and the remaining half is split 50-50 between the state general fund and the state conservation fund. The way the program works is the tax differential is reimbursed to the taxing jurisdictions first through the county conservation fund, and then if the county conservation fund doesn't have enough, the state conservation fund makes up the difference. If the state conservation fund doesn't have enough, then the state general fund comes in and makes up the difference. This year, as with last year, every county except Carver and Dakota was able to pay for it out of their county conservation fund, and the state chipped in about, I believe, $250 from the state conservation fund to defray the costs for Carver and Dakota County. Any money these counties have left in their conservation fund, they can use for activities to preserve agriculture and other conservation activities. Ramsey County, you'll notice, does not have any acreage enrolled. They're fully developed. They don't have any large areas of agricultural land, so they don't participate in this program. I did, for fun, run some numbers, and I mentioned that the $1.50 is the lowest allowed by statute for reimbursement. Last year, the average reimbursement for acreage, the lowest was Scott County at $1.72 per acre, and the highest was Hennepin with an average of $11.27 per acre. Program-wide average of $2.02 an acre. And again, you know, this is going to vary by property within these counties depending on development pressure, of course. But I just thought it was interesting to get a feel for the range, so I did the math. With that being said, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Young-Walters. You know, maybe I'll start with a question, please. And this is really bad. So in counties that have balance left in their tax credit, their county conservation account, you said in some of these, they could be used to reinvest in other sort of agricultural activities. But what about a county like Ramsey or something where there aren't a great number of agricultural activities going on? Do they have broader eligibility to use those funds?
I do know it's not only preservation of agricultural lands. However, I don't know the full extent of activities they can use. I can look into that, and because I would also be curious to know what the funds tend to get used for when they're not spent for the tax credit reimbursement.
Thank you. Yeah, I would be interested, please, and especially with so much urban agriculture going on. You know, is that an eligible area? Thanks. Further questions or discussion on this report? Councilmember Lindstrom.
Just curious how many folks are taking advantage of that, of the opt-out procedure, where the local authority gives it a thumbs up. It's been around since 2019 or so. And I'm also curious why Scott County isn't more, why there's not more folks enrolled in Scott County.
Yeah, Chair, council member, that's a good question. We don't get reported to us why they pull the acreage out. And from the data we receive, well, some counties will tell us date enrolled and date pulled out. It doesn't, you know, everything that's being pulled out, a lot of it was enrolled in like 2009 or earlier. So it's not really possible for me to know, oh, this many acres are coming out due to the early withdrawal versus, you know, the timed expiration or death of owner. I will say, you know, I think when we look at this enrollment trends, I think with the length of the slow and steady decline, it doesn't look like there's a spike that's directly correlated with the early withdrawal provision. But again, I don't have enough data to say for sure how big of an impact it is or isn't having. There was a second part to Scott County.
Scott County, yeah.
I don't know for sure. I have chatted with the county planner just in passing on this a couple times. His sense is that for whatever reason, residents and communities prefer the Green Acre program. He didn't necessarily have any insights beyond that, but so that's all I can share there is I think they're more inclined to use that either because it's what they're more familiar with, or perhaps the local jurisdictions are more comfortable with the shorter, withdrawal period involved in that program, but now I'm just speculating, so I'll stop.
Thank you. I was wondering the same thing.
Yep.
Councilmember Wolf, did you want to comment? You look like you were going to say something there.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, he already said what I was going to
Okay,
say.
perfect,
Green
thanks.
Acres is another program, so just because they're not in this one doesn't mean they're
I mean,
not
they're
in
not
a
doing
program.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Cameron.
Yeah, I would just pose the same question for the northern part of Anoka County as to what's happening there.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, Councilmember. Anoka County, I'm not the sector rep for, so I'm not as familiar with. So I'm afraid I'd have to just say I don't have an answer. Sorry.
Thank you. Further discussion, questions on this report? Further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Young Walters, thanks for the report. Thanks for your work. This is fascinating stuff.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Cool. Committee members, we have dispensed with our agenda for today. Michelle, do you have anything?
No, I don't.
Okay, thanks. Ms. Smith, anything for us? All right. Seeing no further business before this committee, we're adjourned.